For in-depth talks on the South Korean President's summit diplomacy this week, I'm joined by Professor Sung-soo Eric Kim of Hanyang University and UNIST. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
Before his trip to Ukraine, the South Korean leader was also in Lithuania for the NATO summit this week, and Korea is ramping up security cooperation with NATO and the West. What does the country gain from this diplomatic approach?
So if we summarize the core diplomatic strategy coming from the summits that we're doing between Korea and US, Korea, Japan, and Korea, Europe, and any other summits, the core message is that Korea will take an active role in the global leadership, and also we will cooperate with nations that have a value alliance, meaning that sharing the belief of freedom and democracy and a market economy. So it is important to actively participate in these global level important summits and events. And as what is important is we're being invited to these events, so we have to leverage that diplomatic opportunity. And what Korea really has to focus as an agenda to take global leadership is to become G8 in the future. And in order to do so, the Korea, US, Japan trilateral alliance is very important because if you look at G7, other European countries are pro-Korea, but Japan might be the casting vote of determining whether Korea can join G8 in the future. So we are strengthening alliance with US, Japan, and NATO nations to pursue our core strategy as global leadership and value alliance.
Professor, and the visit by a South Korean president to the war zone is unprecedented. What message is South Korea sending here to Ukraine and the international community?
So I think this visit is very symbolic because we were a country 70 years ago that had a war and received a reconstruction package. And now we are going to Ukraine, which is desperately requiring the international society to participate in the peaceful resolution of the war and also to participate in the future reconstruction plan. So I think that we are speaking as of the philosophy and of what we believe in as a freedom and democracy and a market economy, and being an example that a country that received a reconstruction package within such global cooperation can now become a donor in return. So I think this is a very, very strong message to the global society and also to Ukraine as a legitimate reason why Korea should participate in the reconstruction plan.
A strong message. And the South Korean president's surprise visit to Ukraine is grabbing headlines elsewhere too, as foreign media took particular note on Russia's leverage on North Korea. What's your comments on this?
So we have to recall how the concept of human rights and war crime has been developed. And tragically, it was developed based on our history of being a victim of World War II. And the world after the World War II have came together and reconciled and reflected how we can prevent such kind of war criminal activity and deprived human rights situations. And we are now saying, as a victim once, saying that we have to keep those standards. And because Ukraine is in a situation that is going against human rights and criminal wars, we're saying that we will defend those values and assist Ukraine to reconstruct. And this is a very, very symbolic message to Russia and North Korea that might have a human rights issue. And it's also becoming symbolic in the international society and recalling and refreshing the meaning of human rights and criminal wars.
And as part of the Ukraine Peace and Solidarity Initiative, the Korean president pledged more military supplies. There was no mention of lethal aid provision. Do you think there will be a change in policy under certain circumstances?
It is a very difficult call for the Korean government to consider a lethal military support as well. But again, it will be considered within the framework of the Indo-Pacific strategy and the Korea, U.S., and Japan trilateral alliance structure, and for the best national interest of Korea. Symbolized by the visit to Poland, we are strong in the defense industry as well right now. So we have FA-50 and we have very, very prestigious tanks. And KF-21 will be commercialized within a couple of years. We're discussing next year or the year after. And then as a long-term strategy, we would like to also participate in the defense system of Ukraine. Then in such situation, Korea have to show a stronger contribution in this war. And if the government comes to the conclusion that we will have to show a stronger contribution in order to have a higher share in the reconstruction plan, then I think that there is a possibility that the government might consider a lethal support. But with certain circumstances, again, that Russia is going too much beyond our standards of human rights and criminal activities, or in any events that Russia will use nuclear weapons, then those kind of situations will surely be the criteria that we can consider of providing a more active military support.
And speaking of reconstruction, Presidents Yoon and Zelenskyy agreed upon cooperation in rebuilding infrastructure in Ukraine, both at the government and business levels. What specific role can we expect from South Korea after the war?
We are strong in many industries. We're strong in construction, digital, and healthcare, and energy, et cetera, et cetera. We can't name all the industries that we're strong in. For construction, we have a history of providing the infrastructure to Middle East. And we also have participated in the reconstruction plan of Iraq. And also, we have prestigious construction companies. So I think that we can have an active role in reconstruction. But what is more important for Ukraine is to pursue a digitalized reconstruction, meaning that they will need advanced telecommunication networks and also digital infrastructure such as data warehouses, etc., which Korean companies have an advantage. But at the same time, these kind of initiatives cannot be conducted alone. So we will need a global alliance in approaching these events. And that was one of the discussions that President Yoon have agreed with Poland just a couple of days ago.
And Professor, let's talk about the war in Ukraine. Is there an end in sight? And what do you say about Russian President Putin's grip on the invasion?
So if for any war, if it gets longer, the country that is attacking or invading the other country will face an internal political issue, because there surely will be a political group that oppose to the idea of going war. And I think the example of Prigozhin, performing a rebellion against Putin is symbolizing the domestic conflict that Russia is having. However, at the same time, Ukraine and Russia has nowhere to back up in the situation. So they will surely pursue on their best national interests to conclude the war. And the geopolitical situations in Europe will also influence a possibility to find a peaceful resolution of this war. And in my opinion, if the war continues until wintertime, then I think Europe will try to find a peaceful resolution of this war, because Putin's best strategy is to have Europe as a hostage of the energy that they're exporting to Europe. For example, Europe depends on about, more than 30% in oil from Russia, and about 26% in natural gas from Russia. So, but that was the strategy of Russia, but it didn't work last winter, unfortunately, or fortunately, because the winter of Europe showed a historically warm winter. So some countries were wearing short sleeves. So Europe was not really heavily demanding energy last winter, but we'll have to look at the temperature of the wintertime in Europe, which will determine a lot of accelerated discussion of ending this war.
We will have to see how it plays out.
Yes.
And Professor, Sweden and Finland pivoted away from neutral and towards NATO this year. Is Putin's invasion of Ukraine backfiring only to intensify expansion of NATO?
Okay, so after World War II, at least in Europe, there were international measures to prevent a warfare situation that goes against human rights and war criminal standards that we have built. And those mechanisms are NATO and United Nations and etc. And I think that this tragical event that Russia invading Ukraine shows the robustness of the international cooperation system that we have built over more than about 80 years now. So the reason why Russia was invading Ukraine was because of the fear that Ukraine might join NATO, and it's backfiring that the countries like Sweden, which were neutral, even during World War II, is now considering joining NATO. So I think this shows how we have built a robust global society to prevent such kind of criminal activities against other countries. And also the Indo-Pacific strategy can probably use this as an example of considering building a framework of how we prevent such situations in the Indo-Pacific area if one country is trying to invade another country, and also are trying to harm the standards that we have built in terms of human rights and war criminal activities.
Professor Sung-soo Eric Kim of Hanyang University and UNIST, thanks for your insights.
Thank you very much.